This is the third and final video in our series discussing HotDocs parameters and local variables. And in this third video of the series, we are going to focus exclusively on local variables. And I've created, for demonstration purposes, a very simple template with a single variable field for a computation I called child status CO. To set this up, I want to show you the interview of this template. It simply brings up a single child information dialog in which we enter the name, date of birth, and gender of a child. Presumably this would be used maybe in an estate planning context, or we're gathering information about children. And let's say that the ultimate objective here is to uh, produce in the document a breakdown of certain attributes or certain things about these children. Specifically, um, we would want to report on the number of minor children, which might be useful for establishing guardianship. And then, just for good measure, we'll also include a breakdown of how many boys and how many girls. So you can see in the information that I've already entered here, there's a mix of minor and adult children, along with a mix of both male and female. So we're going to use this information and output certain parts of this information in the assembled document. Again, very simple template with a single computation that we are going to develop or further develop to get that information output the various attributes we want to report on here in the assembled document. So I'm going to get into this child status computation variable. Now I've already set up a portion of this just for the sake of time, kind of establish a framework script that we can use. And you can see right now all it contains is a repeat. We're repeating the child information dialog. We've got logic within that repeat to do certain things if, for example, the child is under the age of 18, if the child is male, if the child is female. Haven't done anything here specifically within that logic, but we'll change that shortly. Then we'll say the actual output, the result of this computation, will be a simple sentence reporting on how many minors, how many boys, and how many girls we have in the mix. Now, what we really want to do here and have this run within the repeat is a count of each of the minor children, each of the male children, and each of the female children. So as HotDocs loops through and runs this repeat, it's looking at each repetition, each name, or each child record, if you will, noting who's a minor, who's a male, who's a female, and keeping a running count of all of that. In order to run those different counts, we will need to create what we might call counter variables. Now, before local variables were introduced in HotDocs Developer, we would have had to create 3 different additional number variables. And these would be variables that would show up in lists like this. The available components are just 3 additional number variables within the component file. And that, in some cases, is the most appropriate thing to do. But if all you want to do is run a count within a script, like we're doing here, and that count is used exclusively within the script, and we don't otherwise need that count information, if you will, elsewhere in, say, other components or as direct output in the assembled document, we can create what are called local variables. These are variables, as you might guess, are used locally. And what that means is they're used exclusively within, in this example, the child status computation script. If you watched the first 2 videos in this series, you saw how I went to the locals tab to set up parameters in the other exercises that we went through. This time, I'm going to set up some local variables. And I am going to call the first of these child minor counter. And over here in the type dropdown, I'm going to make sure that this is a number local variable. And I'm going to do the same thing for another local variable I'll call child male counter. Again, this is going to be a number, and do the same thing once more for the female counter, which again is going to be a number local variable. So I've established 3 local variables here on the locals tab. Now, if I go back to the properties tab, I can flesh out the rest of this script. And what I will usually do in this situation is I will set each of those counter variables to 0, give them an initial value of 0. I'll do the same thing here for all 3 of these, just initialize them and set them to 0. Okay, and then here within the repeat, and specifically within the different instances of if logic that I've set up, I will increment the values of these local variables. So here, if the age of the child, based of course on the child's birth date, is less than 18, then I want to increment. I'm going to use the increment model here. It's an instruction model. You can drag it up if you like. Otherwise, you can just type it in. There it is here in the list of instruction models. It's often easier to just type it in. I'm going to increment the child minor filter, or counter, I should say. So it's going to go up by 1 for each child encountered as a minor, or the HotDocs determines is a minor. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to increment the child male filter within the logic, determining whether or not the child is male, and as you might guess, going to do the same thing here for female children. Okay. If you're not already familiar with this auto format button will clean this up a little bit, put some indentation here within the script, kind of let you see how things are related to one another. It just looks a little better. So now you can see within the if logic that we've established within the repeats, I'm incrementing the values of these local variables. So they'll go up by 1 as HotDocs encounters a child that matches the conditions specified in the if logic. Now down here is where I might, within quotation marks, just put in a text string that will actually be merged in the assembled document, but it will be using the information gathered by these local variables, these respective counter variables. I might do something like this, and this is admittedly a simplistic example, not going to work in 100% of the situations in terms of grammatical output in the document, but let's just say that the output here is going to be something like this. There are, and then if you haven't seen this in previous videos or haven't otherwise experienced this, you can hold down your shift key and then hit your comma or left caret key in rapid succession. That creates a beginning chevron here within a text string in quotation marks. And now I'm going to reference that child minor counter. I'm going to do the same thing here, shift period key twice in rapid succession to create that end chevron. So that within the text string is directly referencing the local variable that I've established up here. And based on however many times it gets incremented in the repeat, I'm going to have that number output here, and it'll say there are however many minors. And we'll just do the same thing, make this all one sentence and keep it pretty simple. Do the same thing with the other 2 counters. You have to do it in rapid succession to get that beginning chevron, so sometimes it doesn't take, you may have to do it again. Oh, gotta put girls there in the mix. Pretty simplistic, probably not a very lawyerly sentence there, but it gives us a report on the output or the breakdown of these children based on minors, boys and girls. So the takeaway here in this script is that we are using 3 local variables. They're used exclusively within this script. They're not going to appear here within an available components list. They're just used to produce a result within this specific computation. Okay. And again, they're set up on the locals tab down here in the local variables section of that locals tab. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to click on OK again. And I'm simply going to click on the save button at this point to refresh the interview with the fully developed child status computation variable. Now, if I were to go to document preview, we'll just look at here and see if we can guess what HotDocs is going to do just based on what we can see. It looks like there are going to be um, 2 adult children and 3 minors. So we should expect to see 3 minors, 2 males and 3 females reported coming out of that computation. So if I click on document preview, that is indeed what I see. So these numbers that you're seeing here in the output are coming directly from those local variables. But again, those variables are used exclusively within that computation. The chief advantage to doing this, of course, is that you don't create a whole bunch of additional components in your component file, yet you still retain the functionality that you would otherwise get as if you had created, in this example, 3 new number variables. But by packaging them here as local variables exclusively for use within this computation, it optimizes the file size of your component file, makes for a more efficient development environment. And of course, an optimized component file is going to result in more efficient assembly of documents.